I was looking at my wedding ring in the bright morning light of the office. It shone in the sunlight, representing the prospect of a new life on the horizon. Maria is my name. I am a 28-year-old employee of the president's daughter, the business my father runs. Since entering the firm, I have been working frantically to build up my accomplishments since I am afraid of being called a nepotism hiring. Many workers are now aware of my ability. My spouse, Raffle, who started working for the firm the same year I did, has been my rock. He has consistently offered guidance and assistance since joining my team. The corporation holds Raffle in great respect for his diligence and competence, and even my father has fully endorsed him. Everything went quickly, and we soon had a meeting with his family. Following our engagement, I had my first encounter with his stepsister, Rena. She appeared smart and attractive, although she was only in her early 20s, but there was a chilly presence in her gaze. "You are going to be my brother's wife," she said. Rena's words were polite, but there was a dismissive tone to them. I had heard that Raffle lost his father when he was young and had been living with his mother. There was no mention of Rena. I later learned that Rena was the child of Raffle's mother's second husband, who had suddenly appeared when Raffle was in high school. Why hadn't she been brought along when they remarried? The question crossed my mind, but I hesitated to ask for more details. The first signs of unease surfaced during the wedding preparations. "This dress seems like it would suit me too," said Rena with a meaningful smile as she touched my wedding dress in the fitting room. Her fingertips seemed almost as if they were trying to snatch the dress away. I felt a moment of fear. However, the ceremony went smoothly, and I had almost forgotten about this feeling. But about 2 months after the wedding, I began to feel uneasy again. It was an accumulation of trivial incidents. For example, while I was preparing dinner, Rena would suddenly visit. "Good evening, Raphael. Hard day at work, Maria. May I join you in cooking?" She would ask in her polite manner, which at first seemed considerate. But the pattern that followed was always the same. "Oh, the seasoning is too strong for Raphael's taste," she would say, or "Raphael doesn't like vegetables cut this way," subtly but surely making changes to my cooking, acting as if she knew his preferences inside out. "I'm really happy having you around, Rena," Raphael would say. "Maria, please listen to whatever Rena says. She's had it tough," he would add. What exactly was tough for her? I didn't get to ask in detail at that time. However, there was a strange tension in Raphael's demeanor, as if he was harboring a secret. Rena also invariably found a way to insert herself into our plans for days off. If we were going to see a movie, she would cheerfully say, "A movie with Raphael sounds wonderful. I want to come too." If we went shopping, she would claim, "I know Raphael's taste the best," and proceed to pick out clothes she thought he would like. And Raphael even seemed delighted by all of Rena's actions. At this point, it could be said that Raphael's behavior toward Rena had moved beyond adoration and into the realm of abnormal devotion. Just as I was starting to feel this discomfort, I learned a surprising truth during our monthly dinner with my mother-in-law. When Raphael left the table, my mother-in-law started a conversation that weighed heavily on me. "Actually, there's something I need to talk to you about regarding Rena," she began, hesitating for a moment before continuing with a resolved expression. "Rena is my daughter from my previous husband. We got together when Raphael was in high school." "What? That girl? Her biological father?" I asked. She nodded. "She suffered terrible treatment from him. When I learned about it, I brought her into our current family, and only then could she start living a normal life. When I brought Rena, Raphael's father had already passed away, but Raphael accepted her as his sister. That's why he still treats her so special." Hearing my mother-in-law's words, I felt a thaw in the discomfort I had been experiencing. Raphael's excessive protection and Rena's attachment might be influenced by their painful past. However, this also raised new questions. Why hadn't Raphael told me about this before we got married? A few days later, I decided to ask Raphael directly, "When did Rena become your sister?" I didn't miss the moment his expression tensed. "Ah, did Mom tell you?" he asked. "Yes, It was when my father remarried my mom, he replied, no further explanation given. Whenever I tried to ask more, he would change the subject or suddenly remember an errand and leave the table. He never touched on the story I had heard from his mother. Then a decisive event occurred. It happened just as we were planning our honeymoon. Hey, since it's a special occasion, why don't we take Rena with us? Raffle suggested. I was astonished by his words. Thinking it was a joke, I lightly dismissed the suggestion while rejecting the proposal. Even though Raffle deeply cared for Rena, I never thought he would actually bring her on our honeymoon. However, to my surprise, Rena is coming with us too. In the airport lobby, Rena suddenly appeared with Raffle, who was holding her suitcase, and I couldn't believe my eyes. What? What does this mean? So Rena is coming on the honeymoon too, I said. I told you she was feeling lonely and wanted to join, Raffle answered as if it had been previously agreed upon. Wait, I'm sure I said no. And before I could finish, Rena interrupted in a whining tone. Maria, am I not allowed? I want to be part of my brother's precious memories. At that moment, I felt the stares of those around us, as if it had all been calculated. Look, everyone is watching. Are you going to make Rena cry? Raffle's voice lowered. I stood frozen, my mind going blank. Is this really happening? To face such a scene on the morning of our honeymoon. But what about Rena's ticket? I asked. Here, give me your ticket. I paid for it, so I will decide how to use it, he said. Just then, my phone rang. It was from my father. Seeing the call from my father, I made up my mind. I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. With an apology, I walked away from the scene. Raffle and Rena's voices echoed behind me, but I did not look back. I left the airport and immediately hailed a taxi. I headed back to my parents' house. While in the car, I returned the call from my father, and the response I received was unexpected. Maria, there's been a report from the company's accounting department. His voice was grave, signaling an event that would significantly alter my life. He said it was an important matter, so we decided to discuss it at the company the next day. The following day, upon arriving at work, my father called me into his office. Maria, there's something we need to talk about, he said. His expression was somber. There are some concerning matters regarding Raffle's family. He placed documents on the desk, which showed substantial loans taken out under Raffle's name. These were borrowings using the company's welfare benefits system. A significant amount is being withdrawn every month. Besides, there are several other loans from consumer finance companies. My head went blank. Raffle was in debt, and it was a substantial amount. And there's another thing, my father continued, delivering even more shocking news about Raffle's sister, Rena. There are some discrepancies in her background, he revealed. According to my father, upon investigating Rena's background, facts emerged that differed from what the stepmother had claimed. It's highly probable that she is not Raffle's stepsister. At least the family registry does not indicate that. Moreover, the claim that they met when Raffle was in high school. My father's words seemed to reach me in slow motion. According to police records, Rena was living under a completely different name until 2 years ago. A different name? My voice trembled. My father nodded quietly. Her real name is Lucille Torres. Until 3 years ago, she worked in a nightclub in Brooklyn. Then she disappeared suddenly, and when she reappeared, she was living as Raffle's sister. But my mother-in-law said, Raffle's mother is also involved in this matter. Some of the debts are in her name as well. My father's words made all the past events flash before my eyes like a revolving lantern. Raffle's abnormal attachment, the vague past spoken by the stepmother, Rena's unnatural behavior. Actually, my father paused, choosing his words carefully. Recently, Raffle has started to dip into the company's funds. At that moment, my phone showed a notification. The screen displayed an email with the subject, Honeymoon Cancellation Fee. My heart raced. Tentatively, I'd opened the email to find a cancellation of the trip, booked in my name, along with a confirmation for a new reservation for 3 people. What is Raffle doing? I murmured. My father continued apologetically. I checked with the police. It seems that Rena has a criminal record. She was part of a special fraud group extorting money from several men. It can't be, I said. And among her accomplices at that time was the name of Raffles' mother. Suddenly, everything from the moment I met Raffles started to connect. Why Raffles suddenly approached me, why he rushed to marry me, the president's daughter, and why he kept the existence of Rena hidden until the end. Dad, is Raffles going to be the next president of the company? My father shook his head sadly. No, the next president is you. Once again, my phone rang. It was a message from Raffles. Sorry, but could you front the money for the honeymoon, including Rena's part? I'll pay you back soon. My hand trembled. As I held the phone, the reality my father had revealed, and the casual tone of this message, the contrast, made me chuckle bitterly. Maria, should we consult the police? My father asked. I looked up. No, there's still something I need to see for myself. With a deep sigh, my father leaned back deeply in his chair. Understood, but I won't allow any more harm to come. As of today, I'll limit Raffles' authority. The company will likely begin its own investigation too. I nodded quietly. Leaving the office, I immediately drove off. My destination was Brooklyn, to the nightclub where Rena had once worked. Under the bright sign, I stepped into the club without hesitation. Welcome. Oh, sorry, we're not open yet. A middle-aged woman, presumably the owner, called out to me. Do you know a person named Rena? I asked. At that, the woman's expression changed instantly. You know about her? She replied. I talked about my husband and how Rena became my sister-in-law. Then, 30 minutes later, in the VIP room, I was about to hear a shocking story from the nightclub's female owner. She was our #1 show dancer until 3 years ago, especially popular among the older business clientele, the female owner explained. She pulled out an old album. There was no doubt it was Rena in the photos. However, her hairstyle and clothes were completely different from now more flashy and deliberately alluring. But she had a partner, someone to help her swindle money from the clients. No way. Yes, that person was Raffles' mother, a former dancer and her senior. She was the one who gave birth to Rena. I felt the blood drain from my ears. Was Raffles' mother a show dancer? The woman nodded slowly. The only sound was the melting ice in the glasses, slicing through the heavy silence. Raffles' mother, Helena, had been working here for over 20 years. She gave birth to Rena at 19 and struggled as an unmarried mother all those years, she said with a sigh, reminiscing about the past. Then Raffles' father appeared, a serious company employee who treated the single mother, Helena, kindly. They got married, and Rena was sent to a facility. A facility? I asked. Yes, she wanted to start a new life, but it seemed they were always short on money. Her husband's salary was average for a business person. Helena continued. She continued to play the role of a good wife and mother in front of Raphael and others, secretly continuing her night job. As she tipped her glass, the female owner continued. After Raphael's father passed away, she became desperate. She couldn't make ends meet with just the survivor's pension. That's when she reunited with Rena after a long time, after leaving the facility. What happened to Rena? She followed in her mother's footsteps and started working here. But she did more than just dance. She began swindling wealthy men. Essentially, it sounds bad when you say special fraud, but it was all about skillfully extracting money from rich men. The puzzle pieces in my mind were fitting together one by one. Helena and Rena were a skilled mother-daughter team, but then they suddenly stopped coming. The next thing I heard was that Rena had started living as Raffles' sister. Why suddenly? I asked. The police were getting stricter. They must have thought it was getting risky to continue. That's when they came up with this plan. The owner looked me straight in the eyes. They targeted your company's succession issue. The plan was to make Raffles president and then freely use the company's money. But Raffles was being deceived, wasn't he? Before I could finish, The owner quietly interrupted me. Raffle knew everything from the start. He knew the real Helena and that Rena had been a show dancer. Because after a moment's hesitation, the owner delivered the final blow. Raffle used to come here often since he was in high school, helping his mother with her job. Since high school. My voice cracked. Yes, at first, it was just to drop off and pick up his mother, but gradually he started helping with Helena's work. Having a young, clean-cut high school son was a convenient setup to gain the client's trust. Memories flashed through my mind like a whirlwind. Raffle's meticulous nature, his smart demeanor, how he managed his relationships. These weren't innate traits, but skills honed in this world. Maria, you can see why you were targeted, right? Her words left me nodding silently. My family runs a company. I am an only daughter. Succession issues. My situation must have seemed like the perfect prey to them. But you know, the owner continued with a sigh, I think Raffle was really suffering too. It was as if he had been brainwashed by Helena. What do you mean? After his father died, Helena completely dominated Raphael. She threatened him with abandonment unless he obeyed her, making him accept Rena as his sister was part of that too. The owner's hand trembled slightly as she set down her glass. It was all planned from the beginning, to insert Rena as Raphael's sister and get close to your company. Meanwhile, Helena and Rena were erasing evidence of their past misdeeds. Raphael and me, I stumbled over my words. Was there any real emotion in this marriage? You probably know best, the owner said with a gentle smile. One thing I can tell you is that Raphael started coming here often after meeting you. He would drink alone, saying he needed to talk. Talk. Yes, you would wonder, what really is a family? At those words, tears welled up in my eyes. Once again, my phone vibrated. A new message from Raphael. Tonight I need to talk. Can you come to my parents' house? I took a deep breath and pressed the intercom at Raphael's parents' house. It was just past 8:00 p.m. after hearing the story at the club. I had spent a long time in my car deciding whether to return home or come here. It was a decision made after much deliberation. Oh, Maria! The door was opened by Rena. Gone was her usual demure appearance, replaced now by flashy makeup and clothes. Apparently, there was no need to hide anymore. We've been waiting for you. In the room, Raphael and Helena were sitting at the table. There were familiar documents, details of the honeymoon cancellation fees, and a copy of the new reservation, and even documents that could serve as evidence of misappropriation from the company. Sit down. Raphael's voice sounded hollow. Don't worry about the money. I will definitely pay it back. Pay back? How? At my question, Raphael momentarily averted his eyes. Have you already dipped into the company's money? At those words, Raphael looked up. Did you know? Yes, I heard it from my father. But that's not all. I was just at Club Angel until recently. For a moment, the air in the room froze. I see. Surprisingly, Raphael slumped his shoulders in resignation. Then there's no need to talk anymore. No, that's not it. I interrupted firmly. I want to hear it from you, everything. Raphael sighed deeply. Beside him, Helena clicked her tongue in displeasure. Talking won't change anything. You should just go to the police. Anyway, Helena, I cut off my mother-in-law's words and stared straight at Raphael. What I'm asking for is your true feelings. Was there any truth in our marriage at all? Raphael gave a bitter smile. At first, I just did as my mother told me. But Raphael, Helena raised her voice sharply. However, for the first time, Raphael ignored his mother's interruption. But as I spent time with you, I started to wonder what a real family is. Seeing you live your life so earnestly every day made me feel ashamed of my own brother. What about our promise? This time, Rena interjected. Her voice lacked any trace of her previous demure act. Enough about promises, Raphael said wearily. Enough from both Mom and Rena. It was then Helena suddenly stood up and grabbed the documents on the table. This is the evidence, right? of the misappropriation of funds from the company. What are you planning to do? As I braced myself, Helena held the documents to her chest with a cold smile. It's simple. If I take these to the police, Raffles' life is over. But if you quietly accept this honeymoon situation— Mom, stop it, Raffles shouted. Why should I stop? I've done all this for you. Helena's voice trembled. I did it for your future. To marry you off to this girl and take over the company. You just imposed what you wanted on me. Raffles' words twisted his mother's face. What did you say? Mom, you just forced your unfulfilled dreams on me. Raffles' voice was calm but firm. Marrying rich people and taking over a company, those were all your dreams. If you had married someone other than Dad, maybe by now you've been manipulating me. Thinking that, haven't you? No, I did it for you. Really? For me? And pushing Rena on me as my sister. At those words, Rena stiffened. Brother, stop. Let's end this charade. Raphael looked straight at Rena. Didn't you also not want to do any of this? A flicker of doubt appeared in Rena's eyes. Following Mom's orders, continuing as a show dancer, engaging in almost fraudulent activities. Was this the life you really wanted? Shut up, Helena screamed, holding the documents aloft. Raphael's life depends on me. You wouldn't want this to go to the police, would you, young lady? I quietly stood up. Then you should take them. What? Those documents are meaningless now. I took out my smartphone and showed her the screen where a recording app was running. The sound of the front door opening echoed. Sorry to keep you waiting, my father appeared, accompanied by a lawyer and police officers. A year has passed since then. Raphael received the prison sentence for his involvement in the fraud. However, because he admitted to all the charges and pledged to apologize and repay the victims, his sentence was relatively short. Helena received a heavier sentence, further accusations from past victims followed, and the egregiousness of her schemes was brought to light. And then there was Rena. She made an unexpected choice. I think I'd want to live honestly, she said tearfully just before being arrested. Just like Raphael said, this isn't the life I wanted. Ultimately, she chose to cooperate with the investigation as a witness. She is now in a rehabilitation facility, taking her first steps toward a new life. In the end, I inherited the business. I said to myself, peering out the office window, perhaps it was meant to be from the beginning. In his capacity as chairman, my father still encourages me. In the end, it turned out to be a test of your capacity, he recalls with a laugh. Yes, this whole ordeal was a significant trial for me and an opportunity for growth. The weary Raphael remarked, I'm really sorry, but I just want to say one last thing during the visit. My first true moments of bliss were when I was with you. I took his comments in silence. You should be given the opportunity to experience genuine happiness too, Raphael. The next time, live your life independently and without outside influence. The breeze outside the window heralds the arrival of a new season. I inhale deeply. I shall not hesitate to take on any problems that may arise. The most important thing I've learned from this event is to make my own life decisions. The coziness of our tiny rented flat and the warmth of my father's grin are ingrained in my earliest recollections. My name is Carla, and up until the age of 13, my life was just typical in the greatest sense of the word. James, my father, was the type of man who turned everything into an adventure. Despite our little apartment, he transformed our living room into a fort on wet weekends and our small balcony into a fairy garden. Sarah, Mom, was different. She was more reserved and constantly wished for a larger home and a more opulent lifestyle. However, in those days, their differences seemed to perfectly balance each other out. Carla, sweetie, would you like to spend the weekend at Grandpa's? Mom would frequently inquire, and I would seize the opportunity. Grandpa Richard's house seemed like a second home to me, not because I didn't want to be home. There were many nooks and crannies to discover in this lovely two-story Victorian home with groaning oak flooring. Grandpa would smile knowingly and explain, Your mother needs her alone time with your father. When I would show up at his house, and I need my time with my favorite granddaughter. I was a perceptive child, more than the adults around me realized. I understood that mom sometimes needed space, that she and dad had their own relationship to nurture. It didn't hurt me. If anything, it made me feel mature. Plus, those weekends with Grandpa were precious. He'd tell me stories about Dad's childhood, teach me about managing money. He was a retired bank manager, and make the best pancakes in the world. You know Carla. He told me once while we were having breakfast on his porch, "Your mother dreams of a house like this, but you know what's more important than a big house? A home filled with love." I nodded, understanding even at that young age. Our apartment might have been small, but it was filled with love. Dad would come home from his job at the insurance company, swing me around in his arms, and pepper Mom with kisses until she laughed despite herself. Those moments made our tiny space feel infinite. But life has a way of changing when you least expect it. I was 13 when Dad started losing weight rapidly. At first, he joked about it, saying he was finally getting in shape, but his eyes told a different story. The doctor's visits became more frequent, and Mom's face grew increasingly worried. "It's just a phase," Dad would say, ruffling my hair weakly. "I'll be back to my old self in no time." But he wasn't. The disease-aggressive pancreatic cancer consumed him like a wildfire. Within months, my strong, vibrant father became a shadow of himself. I watched helplessly as Mom tried to hold everything together, but I could see her crumbling inside. The last conversation I had with Dad is forever etched in my memory. He was lying in his hospital bed, his hand barely strong enough to hold mine. "Take care of your mom for me, princess," he whispered, "and let Grandpa guide you. He's wiser than all of us combined." The year after Dad's death felt like living in a fog. Mom spiraled into such deep depression that she could barely look at me. I guess I reminded her too much of him. Thank goodness for Grandpa Richard. He became my rock, my safe harbor in the storm that our lives had become. Living in Grandpa's house wasn't just a temporary solution anymore. It became my new normal. Every morning, I'd wake up in what used to be Dad's old room, surrounded by his childhood photos and trophies. Grandpa made sure I kept up with school, helped me with homework, and tried his best to fill the void both my parents had left, one through death, the other through grief. Mom would call occasionally, but her voice always seemed distant, detached. Her visits were even rarer quick stops where she'd barely meet my eyes before rushing off again. I learned to stop expecting more. Then, exactly 1 year and 2 months after Dad's death, everything changed. Mom showed up at Grandpa's door one sunny Saturday morning, and I almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the grieving widow in black, replaced by someone wearing a bright yellow dress and sporting a new haircut. Her face was glowing with unhappiness. "Carla, sweetie, pack your things. You're coming home," she announced, bouncing on her heels like a teenager. I looked at Grandpa, confused. He seemed just as surprised as I was. The drive back to our apartment was filled with Mom's cheerful chatter about everything and nothing. It was like sitting next to a stranger who happened to look like my mother. But the real shock came when we walked through our apartment door. There, in our small living room, stood a tall man and a girl who looked about 3 years younger than me. They both smiled awkwardly as Mom practically danced to their side. "Carla, meet Robert and his daughter Emma. Robert is my fiancé, and Emma will be your new sister. We're getting married soon," Mom beamed, clutching Robert's arm. The room started spinning. "What? When did this happen?" "Oh, we've been dating for a while now." Mom waved her hand dismissively. "I didn't tell anyone about our relationship. You know how people can get jealous and judgmental. It was better this way." I stumbled to my old room, barely registering that it had been redecorated. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and called Grandpa. He answered on the first ring. "Mom has a fiancé," I whispered into the phone. "She's getting married and didn't tell anyone. There's a man here and his daughter." Grandpa arrived within 20 minutes. I could hear the conversation from my room as he confronted Mom. "Sarah, how could you do this without telling anyone? without telling your own daughter? Unhappy for the first time in forever, Mom's voice was defensive. I've decided to start fresh, to live again. James would want that. He wouldn't want me to waste away in depression forever. There was a long pause before Grandpa spoke again, his voice heavy with resignation. I hope you'll be happy, Sarah. Just don't forget, you have a daughter who needs you too. The 3 months before the wedding were like living in some twisted alternate reality. Our small apartment felt even more cramped with 4 people instead of 2. But that wasn't the worst part. What really got to me was watching Emma, my soon-to-be stepsister, wrap my mother around her finger. Mom, can you help me with my hair? Emma would say, and my mother would drop everything, including our conversation, to assist her. The way she said Mom made my skin crawl, especially since she'd only known my mother for a few months. When Emma mentioned she loved ballet, Mom immediately signed her up for private lessons, something I'd begged for years ago, but was told we couldn't afford. When Emma complained about her old phone being too slow, Mom bought her the latest iPhone model. When Emma wanted to redecorate her side of the bedroom we now shared, Mom took her shopping and spent hundreds of dollars on new bedding, curtains, and decorations. Your sister needs to feel welcome here, Mom would say whenever I tried to point out the disparity in treatment. Stepsister, I correct her. And I need to feel welcome too. She'd just shake her head and walk away. The wedding day itself was a modest affair at a local venue, but Mom glowed with happiness. I stood there in my bridesmaid dress, watching as she fussed over Emma's hair and makeup, barely sparing me a glance. Throughout the ceremony and reception, Mom kept Emma close, holding her hand, introducing her to everyone as my beautiful daughter. I might as well have been a waitress for all the attention I received. Grandpa gave them a check for $5,000 as a wedding gift, a generous amount by any standard, but I overheard Mom's reaction when she cornered him by the restrooms. Really, Dad? A check? She hissed, her face flushed from champagne and anger. I was counting on you giving us your house. We're a proper family now. We need the space. That apartment is too small for 4 people. Grandpa remained calm, though I could see the disappointment in his eyes. Sarah, you're rushing everything. First the sudden engagement, now this. That house isn't just property to be handed over on a whim. Besides, it's where Carla spends half her time now. Oh, so that's it. You're playing favorites now? No, I'm being practical, and maybe you should be too. I slipped away before they could notice me, but the conversation haunted me. My mother had changed so much that I barely recognized her anymore. She created this new perfect family in her mind, with Emma as the star child and Robert as the ideal husband. There didn't seem to be any room left for me, so I did what any unwanted person would do. I spent more and more time at Grandpa's house. At least there, I didn't have to pretend to be happy about being replaced. Years have passed since that moment, and I was about to graduate from high school. Living in that apartment had become a master class in avoiding conflict. I'd learned to be quiet, to take up as little space as possible, to spend most of my time either in my room or at Grandpa's. One evening during our weekly family dinner, another exercise in pretending we were one big happy family, I decided to share my plans for the future. I've been accepted to State University. I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. I want to study finance and business management. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom put down her fork, exchanged a look with Robert, and cleared her throat. Actually, Carla, I think it would be better if you started working after graduation. College isn't necessary for everyone. I stared at her, bewildered. What are you talking about? Dad set up a college fund for me before he died. He always wanted me to get a higher education. Mom shifted uncomfortably in her chair. About that fund? Robert and I have been talking, and we think it would be better to save that money for Emma's education. She's incredibly talented, top of her class and everything. She'll need a good university education to reach her full potential. Robert nodded sagely. Emma has shown remarkable aptitude in her studies. It would be the right thing to do, Carla. You could work for a few years, save up, and then go to college if you still want to. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The college fund, the last gift my father had arranged for me, they wanted to take that too. That money is mine, I said, my voice shaking with anger. Dad left it specifically for my education. You can't just give it to Emma. Don't be selfish, Carla. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Emma is your sister. Stepsister, I corrected, standing up so quickly that my chair fell backward. And that money is the last thing I have from Dad. You've given her everything else in my room, your attention, your love, but you can't have this. I won't let you take it. How dare you? Mom was crying now, but I could see the manipulation in her tears. After everything we've done for you. Emma needs. What about what I need? What about what Dad wanted for me? The argument ended with doors slamming and tears, mostly Mom's, as she wailed about my selfishness. After that night, the apartment became even more hostile. No one spoke to me unless absolutely necessary. Emma would smirk whenever she passed me in the hallway, and Robert wouldn't even look in my direction. When graduation day came, I wasn't surprised to find only Grandpa in the audience. He cheered loud enough for 4 people when they called my name, and his proud smile meant more to me than anything my new family could have offered. That evening, I packed everything I owned into 3 cardboard boxes and my old suitcase. Grandpa helped me load them into his car. Your room is always ready for you, sweetheart, he said as we drove away from the apartment. Always has been, always will be. I didn't look back as we left. There was nothing there for me anymore. College life became my escape. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make my father and Grandpa proud. The business and finance courses fascinated me, and I found myself excelling in ways that would have made Dad smile. Every evening, I called Grandpa to share what I'd learned. Tell me again about derivatives, he'd say, even though he knew more about finance than my professors. I love hearing you explain it. But as my college years progressed, I noticed changes in Grandpa's voice during our calls. He got tired more easily, and his usual sharp wit sometimes seemed dulled. During my visits home, I caught him wincing when he stood up or rubbing his chest when he thought I wasn't looking. It's just age catching up with me, he'd say whenever I asked about his health. Nothing to worry about, sweetheart. But I did worry. I started calling him twice a day instead of once, and I'd drive home every weekend I could, not just on holidays. We'd sit in his kitchen, drinking tea and talking about everything and nothing, just like we used to. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me with such intense love that it made my throat tight. It was the middle of my final semester when Mom called. I almost didn't answer. It was the first time she'd called in 4 years, but something made me pick up. Grandpa died last night, she said, her voice flat and emotionless. The funeral is on Thursday at 2 p.m. Hartford Funeral Home. The phone slipped from my hand. I don't remember much of what happened next, just that my roommate found me curled up on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Thursday came too quickly and not quickly enough. The funeral home was exactly the kind of place Grandpa would have chosen, understated but elegant, with large windows letting in natural light. I arrived early, my black dress feeling too tight, my skin too sensitive, everything wrong because Grandpa wasn't there to make it right. I expected to see Mom and her family, but they weren't there. Instead, Mr. Harrison, Grandpa's friend from his banking days, was organizing everything. They're running a bit late, he said when I asked. Your mother called to say they'd be delayed. The service was beautiful, filled with people from Grandpa's life-sharing stories about his kindness, his integrity, his humor. I sat in the front row, alone with my grief until halfway through the service, when I heard the back door open. Mom swept in with Robert and Emma, all in perfectly coordinated black outfits. They took seats in the far back, and Mom didn't even glance in my direction. Her face was set in a mask of appropriate grief, but her eyes were already darting around the room, assessing, calculating. I turned back to face the front, my tears now burning with both grief and anger. Even here, even now, she couldn't acknowledge me. She couldn't put aside her pettiness for one day to mourn her own father. After the funeral service, I drove to Grandpa's house, my home for the past 4 years, only to stop short at the sight that greeted me there. Scattered across the front lawn like worthless debris were garbage bags filled with my belongings. My clothes, my books, my photo albums. Everything from my room had been unceremoniously thrown out. Some bags had split open, spilling my life across the grass. With trembling hands, I tried my key in the front door. It wouldn't turn. The lock had been changed. I was still standing there, key uselessly in hand, when the door swung open. Mom stood in the doorway, wearing the same black dress from the funeral, but now with an expression of triumph rather than grief. "Oh good, you're here to collect your things," she said, as if she was doing me a favor. "This is my house now. Dad's finally gone, and as his only child, I'm the rightful heir. I've already had the locks changed. We're moving in tonight." I stared at her, unable to process the cruelty of it all. "You couldn't even wait until after the funeral? These are my things, my home." "No, this is my home now," she cut me off sharply. "And you better take your stuff quickly, or it's going in the dumpster. I need to clear the space for Emma's things." She smiled coldly. "She's getting your old room, by the way. She's always wanted a bigger bedroom." I felt numb as I gathered my belongings, stuffing everything back into the torn bags, trying to collect the scattered photos of Dad and Grandpa from where they'd fallen in the grass. My mother stood in the doorway the entire time, watching me like a security guard, making sure I didn't try to steal anything. The drive back to my college dorm was a blur of tears and disbelief. "My roommate..." "Family?" I asked quietly. "Like how you threw my belongings onto the lawn before Grandpa was even in his grave. Like how you tried to steal my college fund. Like how you've treated me for the past 4 years. That was different. We were. This is your problem, not mine." I cut her off, turning to leave. "I suggest you start looking for a new apartment." I drove straight to Grandpa's house, my house now, but I couldn't get in. I pulled out my phone and called the locksmith, explaining the situation. When he arrived, I showed him my freshly notarized ownership documents. "I'm the legal owner of this house," I explained, showing him the paperwork. "I need you to open these locks and then change them to new ones. I want to be the only one with the keys." As the locksmith worked, I gathered up everything that belonged to Mom, Robert, and Emma, all the clothes they'd already unpacked, their toiletries from the bathrooms, Emma's posters she'd already stuck to my old bedroom wall. I loaded it all into garbage bags, just as they'd done with my things. When the locksmith finished and handed me the new keys, I dragged all their bags onto the front porch and arranged them neatly. The symmetry of the situation wasn't lost on me, their belongings, now set where mine had been just days ago. As the sun began to set, I heard the familiar sound of Mom's car pulling into the driveway. I watched through the living room window, Grandpa's favorite spot, to read his morning paper as their reactions played out exactly as I'd expected. "What is this?" Mom's shriek could be heard clearly through the closed windows. "Our things, all our things are outside." I'd opened the door but stood firmly in the doorway as they approached. Mom's face was red with fury. Robert looked like he'd swallowed something sour, and Emma was already crying theatrical tears. "How dare you?" Mom stormed up the porch steps. "We live here now. You can't do this to us." "Actually, I can. This is my house now, legally and rightfully. You need to take your belongings and leave." "We have nowhere to go," Emma wailed. "You should have thought about that before giving up your apartment," I replied coolly. "Not my problem." Mom tried to push past me into the house, but I stood my ground. "Move, Carla. This is ridiculous. This is my father's house." "No, it's my house now. And if you don't leave immediately with your things, I'm calling the police to report you for trespassing. After that, all these bags go straight to the dumpster." I pulled out my phone. "Your choice, Mom, just like you gave me a choice about my things a few days ago. Remember?" The next few minutes were filled with cursing and threats as they gathered their bags. Mom alternated between crying and screaming about how unfair it all was. While Emma kept saying I'd regret this, Robert muttered under his breath about contesting the will. As they loaded the last bag into their car, Mom turned to me one final time. "You're no daughter of mine. Your father would be ashamed of you." I smiled sadly. "No, Mom. Dad would be proud that I finally stood up for myself. Goodbye." I watched them drive away, their car disappearing around the corner. That was 6 months ago. I'm in my final semester now, about to graduate with honors. The house is being rented to a lovely young family. Their monthly rent payments are helping me build my savings just as Grandpa would have wanted. I found his letter in the study safe that first night after everyone left. "My dearest Carla," it began. "If you're reading this, it means you've already dealt with your mother's reaction to my will. I'm sorry I had to put you through that, but I knew Sarah too well. I knew what she would try to do. You have your father's integrity and my business sense. Use them both wisely. The house is yours to do with as you please. Just promise me you'll keep the family photos in the attic. Some memories are worth keeping, even the painful ones." I fulfilled that promise, as well as the ones I had given to Dad and to him. I'm letting go of the past while holding onto the lessons it taught me, and I'm now concentrating on the future. Family isn't always what you were born into. Sometimes it's the people who support, encourage, and believe in you. Somewhere in the city, Mom, Robert, and Emma still reside. They finally got a new flat, I hear. They've made a few attempts to get in touch with me, generally when they're in need of anything. However, I don't answer. We should close certain chapters of our existence.